Okay, and we are live. Welcome everyone to today's live conversation, Q&A session with a member of the European Parliament, Damian Boeselager, on the German election. This live conversation is part of our ongoing speaker series on the Thinkathon project that started 3 years ago. So without any further delay, I would like to welcome Damian, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And maybe we could start with introducing yourself and explain why you wanted to proceed, with a career in politics, and then to also transit to politics in the European level.
Perfect. Thank you, Marilena, for the invitation. First of all, it's very kind of you to have me here. So my way into politics is a bit random. I have to say, it's not the typical way that you would probably hear from a politician. I used to work in the private sector. I did consulting, and then I did a lot of public sector consulting, and then started a master's. And that was in 2016 when, the Brexit referendum had just happened, and when all the right-wing populist parties were rising. So Marine Le Pen was having a very strong campaign against Macron at that time. And then there was, obviously in my country, Germany, the AfD rising and so on. So it was a time of feeling that everything doesn't go together anymore, but rather again into national and kind of closed borders mentalities. And then I was actually also in the States when Trump got elected. So there was another shock, I think, to be honest. And so with two friends, a French woman and an Italian man, we decided that we have to do something about it, and then started a European movement to become basically the first European party that is active across all European member states and trying to push for a reformed and better European institution, European Union.
Great. It's very interesting. And then I see that even though, you started in 2017, you already have members from many countries in the European Union. So it's great. So connecting to this, I wanted to ask you, as one of the co-founders of Volt, when you start, did you have a digital strategy? And how important was it, for the growth of the party and in spreading, this message that you had that you wanted to expand throughout Europe? And if this strategy changed during the years?
So I wouldn't say that we had a digital strategy, but I would say that the whole organization was digital from the beginning. Yeah, so we didn't need to think about, how do we build this in the digital space. But we had no other option because we wanted to do this European from the beginning. So the beginnings of our organization are very much digital. We, built a homepage, had people follow us on Facebook, tried to, ask people to become active via all social media channels, and then started building, digital teams out of these people that said that they would like to become active. And only later on had the first local meetings, because we also very much believe that, you need to meet locally to actually talk to people, to have political discussions also in person. But I would say we could have never built a European party that fast without digital means. So I think digital targeting, digital outreach, and also digital means of communication and collaboration are at the core of how Volt functions. That's why also the pandemic didn't really, inhibit us from growing further or from continuing to work, because this has been the working mode all along, to work on, some form of a shared drive to have calls to organize ourselves.
Great. No, it looks like, you were ready from before. So actually, as you said, the pandemic mustn't have affected you in a big, level in contrast to other parties. Yeah. Okay, that's great. And then again, I want to ask in terms of Volt's ideologies. I read that one of them is citizen empowerment. No, so I wanted to see from your side, how does Volt encourage and engage citizens in the local, in the national, international, and now European levels to rethink and then to shape the politics of today?
So Maybe can you like reframe the question so I can understand it better? Like how
Yeah,
you
yeah,
think
yeah.
citizen empowerment can basically help us
Mhm.
rethink? Okay, maybe I can try to answer. So first of all, we try to really stay away from ideology as a as a word because it's often ideology eases orientation, but that doesn't mean that you actually thought through all the things that you want to do. So I mean, for us, it's a political demand. I think the issue is a broader issue. Yeah. So first of all, we see that people feel very detached from politics, or at least they might even be actively following it, but they never understand that they are actually, the people that are driving what's happening in our society. So like, politics is a way of deciding how we want to solve the issues that we are dealing with as a society as a whole, on all different levels. And sometimes we feel that this is one system and it's somehow further away from us. And here is where our normal life lies and what we do as a job and like our family and so on. And then we have these elections that happen once in a while where we can basically try to influence a bit, but it's difficult because, I mean, there are a lot of votes and we have a small vote and so on. And this is a wrong perception that we have because, I mean, obviously instantly we could become active in a political party and we would be instantly like shaping party politics. And that's also what I'm trying to tell people is like, don't see this as a different system. It's your system. And it's very, I mean, if you take 10 people who you like and go into the local chapter of your city from any party, you will be a very strong part of like shaping where this local party and then also the more national one, I guess, normally is going. So we have a lot of power if we organize ourselves well. That's one side. The other side is, what can we do in between elections and parties and outside parties and so on to allow for more citizen participation in a way that people feel that they can shape what's going on a more ongoing basis, and what kind of new means do exist. And so, I mean, we looked very deeply into citizen assemblies. They happen in Danzig, they also happen in Ireland, and they often discuss questions which need longer discussions and which are not necessarily easy to solve like in a short period of time, but need more like time and thinking and so on. And their citizen assemblies can really help a lot because you can have just randomly allotted citizens that come together and they just discuss, for example, about abortion or like more difficult topics for a longer period of time. That's what they did in Ireland, and then finally allowed the right for abortion until a certain month. And so this is, I think, a system that can work. We also have other ideas. For example, locally, I think, while I'm normally not a big fan of national referenda, because as we know with Brexit, they can also be used by populists to bring in completely different topics to what's actually going on. I think that locally they can work from time to time. When you have, for example, if you know your city and your little area that you live in, and there's a vote, should we, make this a playground or should we make it a parking lot? I think there maybe the people who are there, they all are informed enough to take a decision that would actually be useful. Then you can do the same with citizen budgets on a local level and so on. So the citizen empowerment really builds on two factors for me. One is participation in decision making, and the other one is being informed. So informed participation, informed decision making. Because the reason why we have representative democracy, from my view, is that there are too many issues, and not all citizens can always be informed about all citizens, and that's why you have parliamentarians who then take parts of these issues and with your political guidance, try to work on them. But I don't think that you can replace representative democracy with some form of liquid democracy, for example, on the national or European level. I think that's just a fallacy. And why is it a fallacy? Because people are not informed enough and don't have the time to inform themselves enough. So if you talk about useful citizen participation, or we call it then citizens empowerment, it's about being able to make informed choices on issues of political nature.
Great. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting perspective. Yeah. Following this, I would like to go a bit on the topic of the German elections. Now that you just had in Germany last Sunday, and since the results are in, I wanted maybe to get a general idea of how you perceived the results. Like, what did you feel about the results now in Germany?
For all parties or for my party specifically?
I think as a general idea, we would like to hear your opinion on the outcomes of these results. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, first of all, like Volt ran as well, like across the country, and that for me was a huge success that we did run, because before we didn't have the regional association. You need 16 regional associations to be able to run for elections federally. And so we, in a very short period of time, founded these 16 associations. We hung up 90,000 posters, and all basically with volunteers. And that was really cool. We had cool candidates, a cool program, and so I was quite happy about it. But the fact is that we have a 5% threshold in Germany, and so most citizens vote strategically, saying like, look, if I want to strengthen or change politics in a certain direction, I will vote for the parties that potentially come in or likely come in, and then at least the one issue that I potentially care about is maybe pushed across this landscape more easily. So that's why in the end our results were not as high as I think we expected. But I was happy in the energy and the way that the party did it, and it's a bit of a marathon. So we will continue to build this party with our full energy. On the other parties, I mean, I think it's quite new that we need such a broad coalition to be able to work. I mean, theoretically, a grand coalition is still possible between the Social Democrats and the Christian Conservatives, but none of the two actually want this, and nobody wants to continue working in this way. So I think that's clear. So the other options is basically that the Greens, the Liberals, and the either Conservatives or Social Democrats work together. And that's interesting because the dynamic is now that the Liberals and the Greens started negotiating their position first, and then they can basically be the kingmakers. Yeah, they either choose the Social Democrats or the Conservatives to engage in negotiations with. And that's a fascinating idea, because you have, I mean, the third biggest and the fourth biggest party being in a very strong negotiation position versus the first and the second biggest party. Yeah, so the first is the Social Democrats, second the Conservative, and then only come the Liberals and the Greens. So that, or the Greens and the Liberals in that order. But that's quite a new setup. I think I'm quite hopeful that there will be a lot of change. That the Liberals and the Greens will actually bring in a lot of ideas of stuff that has not been done over the last 16 years of Merkel. And that basically we will actually feel a change in this country, because I think a big issue that also leads to depoliticization of many of us is that basically you feel it's just this boring machine that slowly walks and deals with crises when they come up by dampening them down, but that there's no real vision for what kind of country we want to live in and what kind of continent we want to live in. And I think one sign of that is also that the big topics of the future have not really been discussed in the election campaign either. Yeah? I mean, my topics, European integration was not at all, and even the EU as a whole, Europe was not really on the agenda at all. But also migration, the fact that we will need to figure out how to live in an immigration society and how integration and inclusion works in the future, because we have just such a falling demographic that, I mean, either we figure that out or we will just lose in GDP and interest and power globally. Yeah. So, and this is true for all of Europe. So this has not been discussed. But I mean, there are digitization, many issues need to be done on the European level as well. So I hope that now we will be a bit more constructive with this new government.
Mm-hmm. Great. No, basically you answered a couple of the questions I had for the next part, because I wanted to ask basically on your opinion on the campaigns, and how the campaigns during the prior to election period helped or not helped, for the intended results of the parties, of both party, and also your opinion on the coalition that will be formed, for the parliament. So I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but I think you already mentioned everything. So my next point would be, now we spoke already for the campaigns. So what would be your opinion on the role of the online tools and in general, social media on the elections? So do you think that the digital aspect played a big role or a different role in these elections in contrast to previous elections in Germany?
I'm not so certain if it played such a different role. I think by now we more or less got used to what kind of things can go on and how you use social media. I mean, in the end, maybe it's a bit of a stark thesis, but like in the end, it's still about people and ideas. And obviously, especially for smaller parties, it's interesting to see that you don't need to necessarily go through the filter of television or newspapers to present people and ideas to citizens. But I think, we did run a quite big social media campaign, and I still see that for a lot of people, newspapers and the media, like the TV stations, are still what decides whether they see something as legitimate and big and being there in the political landscape or not. So I think there's a beauty if you have a strong message, strong ideas, and good candidates of how you can use social media. Obviously, there's also the issues that we always had with radicalization and lack of respect and really unbelievable kind of tones sometime on social media. But overall, I think our societies have more or less gotten used to it. And what I didn't hear so much this time is actual, cyber attacks. I think this would probably come out, and there will probably be instances that are already known that I just didn't hear of. But I think that would also be interesting. What kind of disinformation was spread? What kind of countermeasures did we take this election?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also agree with you that with social media we will also have a new potential. So I think very good point. And now I wanted to take a bit of a different perspective in terms of you being the first Volt member to be elected as a member of the European Parliament. And then I want to ask you, in a more personal side of the European level, do you use online campaigns to promote your ideas, for example, in the European level, or any tools, or do you think this is a helpful, way to promote your ideas in the European level in comparison to the, national level? And if you have any particular examples that you would like to share.
I think it's absolutely clear that the majority of my communication is digital. Yeah? Like, I use Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook regularly, and they are the main source of, or like means for me to explain what I'm doing, also YouTube videos. But I have to step up a bit my game. I've focused a lot in the first 2 years on legislative work, and now I really want to also explain a bit better what I'm doing and let people have an insight into my life here in this weird office in the European Parliament. I think that would be that has quite a potential to tell stories and to really explain and give insight into what the life of a parliamentarian looks like.
Okay, very interesting again. And I wanted to ask another question in terms of we see that political parties often try to achieve too much or set, some unrealistic goals. And then at Volt, was there anything that you chose not to focus for this reason, or did you have to avoid any certain actions or goals, even if you wanted to achieve them?
So I would say we are visionary, pragmatic people. I don't think you should ever put down your ambition of where you want to go at all. Yeah. So for us, it's the reform of the European Union and of Europe, basically, to actually be a functioning, parliamentary democracy, as I said, meaning very simply that we just have a process of taking decisions on the European level that is easier and makes more sense, and that we don't have people dying in the Mediterranean because we don't have an asylum system, or that we don't have startups who can't work across the European Union because of all the different regulations and so on. So our vision is very ambitious. Yeah? But how do I get there? I get there by trying to find at all times different options to try to push in that direction. And that can be very pragmatic, but always like with a big vision of, this is my goal, this is where I want to get. And I would never reduce that vision of saying like, okay, it's just not possible, because I do believe that we have a choice and that we have the power to change things. It's exactly the same when sometimes people ask me like, oh, when do you think will the European Union become a federation or a republic or something like that? And I think this question is completely wrong. Like, we are active in this process of trying to push it in that direction. And if many people are going to push it in this direction, then it can be that tomorrow. Yeah. So like we should understand that we're not viewers and participants of history, but that we are actively, here in the present and have choices to make and can all also as individuals make an impact and to try to change things. And so that's why, yes, we should not be stupid in what we do. And I constantly have to make compromises when negotiating things on, in my laws and so on. And I will never achieve the maximum vision, but or the maximum that I wanted. But like, I think you should always be restless to really push as hard as you can, especially if something is very important to you.
Great. Thank you. And, as Think Young, we always, try to put young people at the center of our work, being research papers, big impact programs. So I wanted to see also again, a connection with youth in this conversation that we are having. So I wanted to see, as you being also a young person, how do you feel, about the elections results? Do you think that the priorities that young people have nowadays have been addressed with the election results in Germany?
I mean, first of all, you have to understand that the majority of people is now old. Yeah? I mean, I think the people that are between 18 and 35 is a ridiculous low percentage of the population. I think I forgot. Fact check me, but I think 14% or I don't know. It's a very small part. And since people can't vote with 16, which is something that we are fighting for, it's really, the majority of politics is done by old people, which means that we need to be even louder and even stronger than if we want to fight for the things that we care about. And so I'm quite happy that Volt is a very young movement in terms of, average age, also just because it was started by young people that wanted to not just accept the status quo, but change something about it. And I think we will always have to try to fight for the things that we care about. And in this election campaign, I didn't really have the feeling that there was much focus on education. It just didn't happen so much, or that like the issues of climate change and so on that we care about. Okay, there were some parties that cared about it, but I think it's often out of the perspective of calm, chill. And the same is true actually for the Social Democratic lead candidate, who said retirement benefits won't be touched, which is basically saying, look, the older big electorate, don't worry, you won't have to bear any of the costs of of the social system, which is also really bad, because most of us as young people know that we will never get retirement benefits if this continues like this. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously where I think that the young generation has been a bit neglected, or not a bit, has been neglected completely when you make these statements and don't explain how you finance that.
Thank you so much. And we did a great job, because we answered, all my questions, in a, very short time. So just one last statement, from your side, being a young MEP nowadays and being, an ambassador of this project now that you are here speaking to us, do you have, any last messages that you want to share with young people and what they can do, how to do it in order to change the world, if they want to, like you?
I think first of all, I mean, my story is really weird, because I was in a student room with two friends, and we thought, hey, how about we build a European party? And now, I mean, only 2 years later, I was in the European Parliament, and now I've been 2 years in the European Parliament. So 4 years later, I'm just sitting here at this desk, and I was thinking, like, okay, that's so weird. Like, we just had this idea and we ran for it, and now I'm like sitting here, and I was, for example, negotiating the EU Recovery Fund, which is like 672.5 billion euros. But how is that possible? If I was just still in my student room, a couple of years ago, how is that even? So I think my story, even though I'm more critical normally, is really one where you would say, look, you can, if you try, good things can come out. If you try, to just whatever it is, run for it, something will happen. If you don't try, nothing will happen. And it's such a simple insight, but like as soon as you set things in motion, as soon as you set yourself in motion, you are obviously much more interesting for other people to potentially do that with you if that's what you want to do. I mean, I'm a big fan of this view of motion and just things happening if you go for it. And obviously there needs to be the right time and the right moment, and these also doesn't always need to be new initiatives and so on. They can also just be something that you want to try for yourself or whatever. But I think it's important to follow. If you have something that you want to try out, then to go for it and try it out. Obviously with being smart about it, being critical, analytical, creative about it, but to give it your everything, I think is quite rewarding. And so I would definitely say, try these things and try to find out if that's something that, if your idea can fly. Yeah, for sure.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think it was a very short but to the point discussion, and thank you so much, for all the insights. And also I want to thank the people that were here with us today online and that followed the conversation. And have a good day, everyone, and see you again for another live discussion in the next weeks. Bye.
Thank you so much, Marlene. Bye-bye, everyone.